we are picking up, if I remember right, we're going to pick up right around line 98 or so. But before we do, I need to make a couple of comments that I forgot to make on whatever day that was, Monday, about Shakespeare. First thing is regarding what's called the first folio. The first folio was, or is, is a large printed book. It's about this tall and about that wide, so from there to there, and about yay thick, okay? It's the first, for lack of a better phrase, collected edition of Shakespeare's plays. Prior to this publication in 1623, some of Shakespeare's plays had been available as single volume printings, okay? Some of them went through multiple printings, etc. You have good printings and bad printings. We're not going to get into that. The first folio is the first book that tries to bring together all of Shakespeare's plays. It's the first printing of 22 of those 37 plays. So prior to this publication, people couldn't read these 22 plays. They could read Hamlet, King Lear, several of the others, but not the 22 that were first published in 1623. It was put together by Shakespeare's former colleagues in what had been the Lord Chamberlain's men from approximately 1592 to 1603. Their name was changed to the King's Men in 1603 because from 92 to 1603, their patron was the Lord Chamberlain, all right? Queen Elizabeth's kind of right-hand man. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth dies, and King James VI of Scotland becomes King James I of England. Now, he's King of England, he's also King of Scotland. His kingship in England, he's called King James I. In Scotland, he's still called King James VI. You get a bit of a union between the two kingdoms in 1607 or so, but you don't get what becomes called the United Kingdom, like we have today, until 1710, I believe it is, all right? So some of his former colleagues in this acting company get together and collect these plays and have them published in this big, massive book. It's called the First Folio because it's the first folio size of all these plays being collected. There's a second and third folio also published later. This is a huge undertaking. The guy who agrees to print these is he's taking a bet that he's going to break even on the cost because I don't remember what the exact cost was at the time of printing, but it was something like 10 or 20 pounds for the book. A pound, Shakespeare's day, we're talking $1,000 or so, right, for this book. It's partly because there's 7 years from when Shakespeare dies to when this is published that the group of people I mentioned Monday, the anti-Stratfordians, they take this delay as being indicative, as being evidence for their belief that William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon was not the author of the plays. There are poems that are at the beginning of this volume that refer to Shakespeare as being from Stratford-upon-Avon. They refer to him as being, not a university-educated blah, blah, blah. Ben Jonson, the same guy who said Shakespeare had little Latin and less Greek, he calls him the sweet swan of Avon, which the people who aren't anti-Stratfordians go, Ben Jonson says this, and the anti-Stratfordian, they have an answer for everything, by the way. For every piece of evidence that there is to say William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon is the author, the anti-Stratfordians have something to counter it. Okay? In that sense, they're like conspiracy theorists. You try to argue with a conspiracy theorist about anything, and they always have, well, yeah, but there's always some, okay? Okay, that's it about that. A comment about the stage. Globe stage, about 42 feet widthwise, which is just a little bit more than this room. I believe this room is about 30, and not much deeper than this room. 42 wide, 24 deep, okay? I'm gonna get to this stuff in a minute. All right, so let's pick up with where we left off. So, we saw Aegeus comes forward, tells the Duke what the problem is. Demetrius, swears his love essentially for Hermia. Hermia makes kind of an off-color statement or ribald statement, let's say about, I wish my father looked at Lysander with my eyes, etc. Demetrius says to Lysander, line 90, relent, sweet Hermia, and Lysander, yield thy crazy title to my certain right. Lysander, you have her father's love, Demetrius, let me have Hermia's. Do you marry him? Okay? Again, that's aiming for probably both levels of the audience. The groundlings are going to get the dirty humor there, the implied homosexuality, and those in the galleries, they're going to kind of like the verbal wit with it, right? So Lysander, in responding to Aegeus says, scornful Lysander, like, how dare you suggest such a thing? He says, true, he has my love. And what is mine, my love shall render him. She is mine, and therefore all my right of her I estate unto Demetrius. By saying I do estate, he's saying like I bequeath. Like she is his will, right? His last will and testament. So Lysander replies, I am, my lord, as well derived as he. I asked my first class, who's he referring to, my lord? Is he speaking directly to Aegeus? Or is he also addressing Duke Theseus? Who will have the final decision? Theseus. Okay? So what Lysander does here is he lays his cards on the table, essentially. He says, compare me with Demetrius, which is what Hermia asked the Duke to do. All right? So he gives several ways in which he and Demetrius are pretty even. He says, I am as well derived. That is, I come from a good family. We have a good old family name. What else? I'm as well possessed. I am as wealthy as he is. Okay? My love is more than his. I don't know how you quantify that. He's saying, I love Hermia more than he does. My fortunes everywhere is fairly ranked, meaning Lady Fortune smiles just as much upon me as upon him, and that is demonstrated, let's say, by his way in the world, his fortunes in the world, his business affairs all seem to be doing well, whatever those business affairs are. He says, as fairly ranked, if not with vintage. If I'm not actually doing better. I mean, we could pull out our bank accounts and our stock listings and say, well, Lysander's doing a little bit better than Demetrius. And more than all these, I am beloved of beauteous Hermia. That should count, he's saying. She loves me, she doesn't love him. But that's not the cream, so to speak. He still has the topping to put on. What's his last bit of evidence? Demetrius is what? unfaithful. He says, Demetrius, I'll avouch it to his head. Your gloss says, I face. That doesn't help. What does avouch it to his head means? I'll walk up to him and smack him upside the head. It's a visual cue to what? 300 years earlier, if a knight wanted to challenge another knight, anybody know what he did? What he would do? He'd pull off his gauntlet, and he could do one of two things: slap him across the face or throw it at his feet. That's a challenge. According to knightly custom, you have two options. You accept the challenge, and it's usually a fight to the death, or you back down. When saying, I'll avouch it to his head, he's saying, I'll fight him to the death. What is he going to avouch? He made love to Nadar's daughter Helena and won her soul. Doesn't mean he had sex with her. He wooed her. He courted her the exact same way Lysander did Hermia. Okay? He wrote silly love songs. He wrote beautiful poetry. He sang outside her window. The whole 9 yards. And she, sweet lady, dotes, devoutly dotes in idolatry upon this spotted and inconstant man. Couple of things there. Spotted and dotes. What does it mean to dote on something? Or to dote on a person? It means you give your all. You put all of your focus, all of your energy in or on that person or thing, to the exclusion of everything else. It's beyond reason. It's irrational. What do we say about teenagers often, who quote unquote fall in love with somebody? Is it really falling in love? No, it's infatuation. And that infatuation means mentally it's like they've been snookered. I don't mean that there's anything false being implied on the part of the person who's doing the snookering. It means that the person who is affected has lost all ability to reason about this other. That's what Lysander says Helen now does. Notice, she dotes on Demetrius. And he gives us two different ways. Devoutly dotes. Devoutly is right worship. So she worships him. And then he says dotes in idolatry. Why? Because Demetrius has become for her an idol. What's an idol? It's anything that someone raises up to a high level. There's a saying, there are no real atheists. Why? Because everybody has their God. Their God might be their job. Their God might be their car. Their God might be sex. It might be booze. It might be alcohol. It's whatever takes the center place of your life. Demetrius has taken the center place of her life. Why? She believed him. She fell in love because of all the smooth words he said. Okay? And he then calls him a spotted and inconstant man. Your gloss says, morally stained. Well, okay, that's one way of looking at it. Spotted also implies what? What color are all of these characters? They're white. They're not Egyptian. They're Greek. Okay? Spotted implies what? Whiteboard, right? Spotted. No longer white. It's mostly white. And I can take all these other markers and do all that so that it ultimately would become unwhite. You take a gallon of white paint, you drop one drop of black paint, it's no longer white. It might be 99.99, but it's tainted. It's no longer pure. That's what he's saying about Demetrius. Theseus says, yeah, I heard about that. In fact, I meant to talk to Demetrius about that. Why? Why would Theseus give a you brats you know what for Helena falling in love with Demetrius? Remember when I talked about comedy? You begin with that social rupture. Even before the play began, you could argue there's a bit of a rupture. Why? Because Demetrius wooed Helena and then threw her away. Treated her like trash. There's the beginning of the rupture, if you want. Okay? So he says, Aegeus and Demetrius, you guys come with me. I want to have a talk with you. Okay? And when he leaves, he says, Hermia 1:17, after he tells Aegeus and Demetrius, he has some private schooling for them. For you, fair Hermia, look, you arm yourself. Arm yourself. Gear up. Okay? To fit your fancies to your father's will. Your fancies, your desires, your likings, your wantings, your imagination. To what? To your father's will. He's saying, conform your everything to what your father wants. Or, so that's one option. Or, else the law of Athens yields you up, which by no means we may extenuate. That is, I can't bend it. I can't violate the law. Or, the law of Athens yields you up to what? So, do what your father wants, marry Demetrius, life of forced rape, because she doesn't love him, so any sex is not consensual, so to speak. Or, die, or become a nun. Again, forced. Okay? Come, my Hippolyta, what cheer, my love? So he tells his fiancée, come on, time to go. Why does he say, what cheer, my love? And what does it mean? What's cheerful? If you say somebody's cheerful, describe them. Walking around with a chip on their shoulder, frowning, kicking, hitting everything? No, if they're cheerful, they're happy. They're full of joy. They're full of cheer. But what is the cheer getting at? The cheer is not what's inside. The cheer is demonstrated on this, on the face. Cheer ultimately gets back to an aspect or a look on the face. It's the happy face. It's the glow. It's contentment. So there's a difference. You can tell somebody who's not having a good day. Looking at the ground, there's a frown, there might be tears, there might be sighing, there might be, you can just tell they're wired up. Somebody who's having a great day, meanwhile, head is up, they're looking up, they're smiling, they're nodding to people, all that kind of stuff. So why? What cheer, my love? Translate that to 2024, and I think he's saying, what's wrong, my love? Okay, so put yourself in Hippolyta's shoes. Queen of the Amazons. You're marrying Theseus. Why? Are we told it's out of love? I wooed thee with my sword, he says, and won thy love, doing thee injuries. Now, won thy love, does that mean he won her heart by beating, literally, beating her with his sword? Is it that she went, finally, a man worthy of me, who can defeat me in battle? That's possible. That is entirely possible. Okay? Or, that because she was defeated in battle and injured, literally, by his sword. Maybe she's got her arm, in a sling or something, because it's been cut. All right? Theirs is not necessarily a coming together of minds and hearts. She's a spoil of war, obviously. Okay? What cheer, my love? Again, put yourself in her shoes. What has she just heard? A young maiden, teens probably, is being forced to what? Choose between a man she doesn't love, death, or to be a chaste virgin praying to the moon for the rest of her life, the goddess of the moon, the rest of her life. What do Amazon stand for? Women. If anyone is going to stand up for women's rights, it's Hippolyta. And they, according to the stories, they did. I don't mean women's rights like we think of them, but they fought for women. They stood by, they rescued women. All right? She hears her 4 days from now husband pronounce this law, and I think when he says, let's go, she gives him a look that, if faces shot daggers, he'd be a pincushion. And that's why he says, what cheer? Like, what's wrong? And if I were directing, see, I think this is a verbal stage direction on Shakespeare's part. I think Shakespeare is telling the actor portraying the actress portraying Hippolyta to give Theseus a dirty look. And then he began that with, come, my Hippolyta. She gives him that look, and she just starts to walk ahead of him. She's not going to walk off hand in hand, smiley face. Okay? Everybody leaves but Lysander and Hermia. And he's like, what's wrong? Why are you so pale? Hello, Lysander, didn't you just hear? And she says, be like for want of rain, which I could well be teen. In other words, she's about to just burst full with tears. Okay? And he says, for aught that I could ever read, could ever hear by tale or history, the course of true love never did run smooth. For all that I could ever read or hear by tale or history, oral stories, what is he saying? The course of true love never did run smooth. The whole history of humanity, he is saying, lovers have never what? They've never had it easy. There's always been problems. There's always a hill to climb. There's always an obstacle to get over. Okay? And she says, O cross, too high to be enthralled, too low. Your gloss tells you cross. Oh, vexation. Maybe. Vexation is to, be confronted with a problem that you can't solve. You're pondering, you're thinking how to get around it. That's not necessarily what she means. I think she means cross like cross. Thing that's going to kill me. What's the thing that's going to kill her? Too high to be enthralled, too low. What's the too high? I think one way of reading this is she's saying, I can't be tied, nailed, so to speak, to Demetrius. He's too low for her. Is this saying that she's a narcissist or she has this big ego thing? Is she higher on the social ladder than Demetrius? We don't know. Okay? Lysander says, or miscrafted in respect of years, like maybe Demetrius is older, like father older age. Again, all the productions I've seen, Demetrius and Lysander, same age. right? But a lot of directors skip lines. When my son was in this play with the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, they skipped some really important lines. And I was like, why did you guys skip some of these? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. The director didn't understand it, whatever. They didn't want to get bogged down. They cut the play from 3 hours to an hour and a half. So that's half the play, right? So they go back and forth, and Hermia says, line 115 following, if then true lovers have been ever crossed, that is, have always confronted obstacles and difficulties, etc., and in almost all of Shakespeare's romantic comedies, that crossing, it's fathers for daughters. Look at Romeo and Juliet. It's the fathers of the Montagues and the Capulets that keep Romeo and Juliet from getting together, okay? So if then true lovers have been ever crossed, it stands as an edict in destiny. What does she mean? What's an edict? That's a ruling. That's a proclamation. She's saying, if this is always the case, then it is destiny, fate, that says it's always the case. In other words, there aren't lovers who get around that. All right? So, if it is fated that all true lovers have to overcome these difficulties, she says, then let us teach our trial patience. Because it is a customary cross, as due to love as thoughts and dreams and sighs, etc., etc. So, if this is how it is for everybody, she says, let's teach our trial patience. She doesn't mean by trial like courtroom trial. What's a trial? It's a test. See, when you try something, you're testing yourself or the thing. The word try, literally it's related to the word test, like kind of test you take, and the ultimate phrase behind a test tube, because in all of those, what you're doing is you are proving something. You're trying to find out what it really is. So she says, let's make our test, or let us teach our test, our proving, patience. If you know anything about baking, before you throw a loaf of bread in the oven, what do you have to do first to the dough? In America, we call it rise. You have to let it rise. In England, they call it proving. Again, you have to let it rise. It takes time. If you're a kid and you're told to be patient, well, anyway, you're told to be patient, what does that mean? You got to let some time pass. But it's not just letting time pass. If you're told, be patient, obviously you're not being patient. If you're not being patient, then what do you want? You want that something now. So to be told to be patient means wait and what? Internally, what do you have to do when you are patient? You suffer. It might not be great suffering. It's not like the Russian dissident who just died up north of the Arctic Circle. Not that kind of suffering. But it's internal suffering. Because we all want things now. That immediate gratification. You gotta hold off. I'm a full proponent for saying, we got 5 people here right now. There are 10 people in this class. My first class says 19. 8 showed up on Monday, okay? If they don't come, they don't come. They're not learning, etc., but they're not getting out of it what you guys are, those who are showing up. You're showing your patience by being here and such. So, she says we have to teach it patience. Why? Because it is a customary cross. What's meant by customary? parents had to go through this. Their parents had to go through this. In other words, it is a custom of all lovers. And just as all lovers before us had to go through it, so do we, to patiently endure. Okay? As due to love as, in other words, she says, needing to have this patience, it's like all these other things that are part of love. Thoughts, dreams, sighs, wishes, tears, right? Who is in love that doesn't think of the person they love? Who is in love that doesn't dream about the person they love? That doesn't have sighs, etc., etc. Lysander, a good persuasion. Well done. That's good rhetoric. You've convinced me. Has she really? But what does it also mean? What does she have to do to her? She has to convince herself that this is the case. So he says, I've got an idea. In other words, I'm going to take that course of true love that never did run smooth, and I'm going to smooth it out. How? How's he going to remove the obstacle, and what is the obstacle between Lysander and Hermia marrying? It's her father. Is he going to have her father killed? No. They're going to remove themselves to where her father doesn't have any say. Okay? We talked the other day. There are two settings, Athens and the wood. So you have Athens and the wood. Athens represents law, reason, morality, culture, civilization, order. The wood represents the exact opposite of all of those. Anarchy, disorder, discord, etc. And he says, I have a dowager aunt with no child who lives in the wood 7 leagues hence, and she loves me like her own. We can go there and be wed. Meaning, and live with her, and when she dies, we'll be filthy rich. They won't need Athens for anything. Because the law doesn't reach there. Just like when I talked the other day about the globe. When they rebuilt the theater south of the River Thames, at that point, the law couldn't touch them. There wasn't a mayor of Southwark, it's just a community outside London at the time that Shakespeare and his gang rebuilt the globe. Okay? So he says, meet me there tomorrow night. Meet me a league away from Athens in the woods, and we'll make our way to my aunt's house, and we'll get married there. And she says, I will. Helena comes in. And Hermia calls her fair Helena. And she says, why are you here? And she goes, you call me fair? That fair again I unsay, etc., etc. And then she talks about Hermia, describes Hermia in these glowing terms. Why? Because Helena secretly has some, lesbian love? No. Because when she talks about Hermia, she's using language that Demetrius would use. Your eyes are lodestars, your tongue sweet air, blah, blah, blah. Her point is, why don't I look like that to Demetrius? Okay? Hermia, I frown upon him, and yet he loves me still. Well, that's the same thing that we're going to hear Demetrius in a minute say ultimately to Helena. So, they go back and forth, and Hermia says, Lysander and I, we're going to leave here, we're going to get married. Okay? Line 209 and following, Lysander tells her, tomorrow night we're going into the woods, we're going to meet my aunt, we're going to get married there. And then Hermia says, and here's where you can meet us if you want to come. That place where you and I used to get together, gather primroses and everything, meet us there. Big question, why? Why are they telling Helena this? Is she going to go off and get married with them? No. Is she going to run off into the woods and live? No. Why tell her? It's a plot device. That's it. Shakespeare's got to have a reason to get Demetrius in the wood too. Okay? So they tell Helena, they leave, and we have Helena left alone on the stage, so she gets a soliloquy. Bear in mind, every soliloquy, if it is a true soliloquy, there are two conditions. One, the speaker has to be alone on the stage. Okay? And two, the speaker reveals his or her innermost thoughts, what they really truly believe to be true. Okay? So Helena says, through Athens I am thought as fair as she, but what of that? As fair as she. People in Athens think of me being as beautiful as Hermia. Now, we've not heard anything description-wise about them yet. But later on in the play, we are going to get some descriptions. And you need to, I think it helps to understand this now. If you're watching the play, it should immediately hit you, if it's good casting. Helena should be tall. Not tall, but 5'8", 5'9", supermodel tall, okay? She should be blonde, fair complexion, light colored hair. She should be kind of willowy, all right? Hermia should be shorter, like 5'2", 5'1", maybe. She should have a darker complexion on her face, arms, hands, and all that. And her hair should be black, because she's going to be described as raven-headed. And her skin color is going to be described as Moorish. That's North African. Okay? So, tall, willowy, blonde, fair complexion, shorter, dark complexion, dark hair. So she goes on and talks about how she's as fair as Helena, but Demetrius doesn't know that and won't accept it. And he's not looking, as he ought to look. And she goes on about looking with love's eyes and etc. So she says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell Demetrius about Lysander and Hermia's plan. Why? Because then Demetrius will go off in the wood to try to find them and stop them. And she can go off after Demetrius. Okay, so she going to try to persuade him differently there? Kind of. But again, rationally speaking, what's her plan? She doesn't really have one. Rationally speaking, in terms of Shakespeare's plotting out the play, though, what does it do? It gets them out of the world of reason and rationality into the world of fantasy and chaos. And everything can happen in Neverland that can't happen here. All right? Scene 2. I'm going to say just a couple things about it. We get introduced to the rude mechanicals, the skilled tradesmen. Okay? And we hear when Philostrate went off and roused the youth of Athens, as Theseus asked him to do, apparently these guys heard about it and they're going to put on a play. Or they hope to put on a play for the Duke. And the play is titled, line 9, The Most Lamentable Comedy and Most Cruel Death of Pyramus and Thisbe. That alone tells us something about these characters. They might be great at their trades, but when it comes to book learning, they're dummies. Why? Most lamentable comedy. That's an oxymoron. Comedy here is supposed to be funny. But it's lamentable. Why would you lament something you laugh at? Okay? And most cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe. Comedy is not supposed to have deaths. And here we're going to have these two lovers die. The course of true love never did run smooth. There's that theme. It's going to tie together. Okay? So notice, actually in the play, we have more than just four lovers. We have Theseus and Hippolyta, that's one. Titania and Oberon, that's two. Hermia and Lysander, that's three. Demetrius and Helena, that's four. Pyramus and Thisbe, even though it's a play within a play, five. Star-crossed lovers, Courts of True Love, is all throughout the play. Okay? So, only other thing I want to say about this is what one character keeps chiming in. What one character wants to play all the roles in the play. He wants to play, he's given the role of Pyramus, a gallant knight who dies for love. But he also says he can play Thisbe with a small voice. And then he wants to play the lion to fright the women. The character is Nick Bottom. He is a character that comedic actors, love to play. Because there's no self-control. If you get the opportunity to play the role of Nick Bottom, you can go completely over the top. I would have died to see a production of this play with Robin Williams playing Nick Bottom. He would have had everybody just rolling on the floor laughing. Of course, he wouldn't have stuck to the script. He would have just, Robin Williams did, okay? So, Act 2. Notice, a wood near Athens. So, Athens is the setting for all of Act 1, and then we jump to the wood. And we're in the wood for all of Act 2, all of Act 3, and Act 4, Scene 1. And then we pick up with Act 4, Scene 2, and go to the end of the play, we're back in Athens. So we start off with reason, rationality, culture, civilization, and then we go off to La La Land for the majority of the play, and then we come back to everything following by the rules of logic and order, okay? A fairy comes in through one door, if this is the globe, tiring house pets here, comes in through one door, and Puck, another fairy, comes in through another door, okay? And Puck asks the other fairy, what are you doing here? And the fairy says a bunch of stuff, and then says the queen and her elves are coming here soon. Puck, the king keeps his revels here tonight. Take heed the queen come not within his sight. Why? For Oberon is passing fell in wrath, because that she has her attendant hath a lovely boy stolen from an Indian king. So, what are we told? The king and queen of the fairies, what? Are living in perfect harmony and accord? No. They're living butting heads. Course of true love never did run smooth. And think of the great chain of being. Where are the fairies on that chain? They're above us. If there's a problem in the chain, everything beneath the chain is affected. In fact, we're going to be told it's not just only everything beneath the chain, it's the whole natural world is also affected. Okay? So, he tells us why Oberon is angry. The queen, Titania, has a young Indian boy that Oberon wants to be one of his henchmen. He's a changeling. We're told this boy was captured, was taken from his home by Titania. And there's a reason for that. The boy's mother died. And the boy's mother, Titania calls her, was a votress of her order. That is, she kind of like worshipped Titania. Okay? And she's doing this. She's taking this boy into her fairy train, followers, for the sake of the boy's mother. All right? So, Oberon comes in one door with all of his attendants, and Titania comes in the other door with her attendants. And Oberon says, line 60, ill met by moonlight, proud Titania. ill met, unsmooth, crossing. This is not a judicious, this is not a fortunate meeting. Okay? What? Jealous Oberon? Why would she suggest that he's jealous? Fairy skip hence. I have forsworn his bed and company. Bed, we're not sleeping together, and I don't mean sex, I just mean side by side in bed. And his company means I don't even want to be in the same space as he is. Problem in that realm, problems all throughout. Okay? So, notice, with Theseus's final comments to Hippolyta, come Hippolyta, what cheer my love, there might be an indication of a problem there. We've already been introduced to the problem between Hermia and Lysander. The problem is named Aegeus and Demetrius. Problem between Helena and Demetrius. Now here's a problem in love. Okay? Oberon, tarry, rash, wanton. Your gloss tells you for wanton, headstrong creature. That is a meaning in the Elizabethan period, in the 16th century. There's another meaning. And the other meaning is, rash, headstrong creature is a deeper down meaning. There's another meaning that's more at the surface. Scottish philosopher, can't remember his first name, named Occam, came up with a philosophical idea called Occam's razor. Has to do with logic and solving problems. Occam's razor is that solution is best, which is the easiest. Wanton means loose sexually, usually applied only to women. So rash wanton is kind of like calling her a filthy whore. But it's not literal, it's metaphorical. Why? We're going to be told in just a few moments. Tarry, rash, wanton. Am not I thy Lord? Then I must be thy lady. Little side note here. It's interesting because the word Lord and lady, both of those go back to having something to do with bread in Old English. Old English, Lord comes from hlaford, which is a contraction of hlafware. Hlaf, loaf, ward, guardian, protector. From this word we get warden. Okay? Lady, she says, if you're my lord, then I must be your lady. Lady comes from hlafdia, loaf again, dia, maid. The maid of the loaf, the protector guard of the loaf. This one probably the one who needs the bread. What does bread have to do with being a man or woman? It's the centerpiece of the home, right? Because without food, everybody dies. It's the hearth, the table. So, she says, oh, if you're my lord, then I must be your lady. But what? I know when you leave fairyland, and what she really means by that is when you get up from our bed and leave, you're going off to the earthly realm and doing what? You're pretending to be Corin to a Phillida. Okay? Corin and Phillida. These are stock names of young men and young women in pastoral poetry. Pastoral poetry is set out in the country, in the fields, in the groves, away from the city. And Corin is your typical farm boy or shepherd. Works with his hands, he tends the crops, he tends the cattle, sheep, whatever. And Phillida is like your kitchen maid, farmer's daughter, milkmaid. Works with her hands, she milks the cows, she gathers the eggs. Corin and Phillida are kind of stock images of natural youth out in the country, getting along with simple country pleasures. Okay? What has she just said? When you leave our bed, when you leave fairyland, I know you're out here seducing simple young girls. Okay? She goes, why are you here? Other than to bless the wedding of your bouncing Amazon Hippolyta and Theseus. And he goes, how canst thou thus for shame? And what he means by that is, how can you say such a thing when I know your desires for, your love for Theseus? And he talks about ways that she got Theseus out of tight spots. The three instances, the three women that she mentioned, your gloss explains a little bit about them, are women Theseus ravished. It's a nice old word. Today we use rape. Theseus in Greek mythology, yeah, he's this great hero and stuff, but he also has his dark side. Again, because women don't count in Greek mythology, okay? So, she says these are the, you're not really jealous of that. And she goes on, big long speech, and talks about how their discord has affected the world. Fogs, mists, it's not cold enough during the winter, it's too hot during the summer, all that kind of stuff. So, Oberon says, she says, end of her long speech, 1:16 or so, we are their parents and original. That is, we are the source of all these problems in the world. Both natural world and human world. It's because of them that Hermia and Aegeus are fighting. Okay? He says, then fix it. Give me the boy. That's all. That's all you need to do. And she says, nope. How long do you intend to stay? She says, till after the wedding. Give me the boy and I will go with you. Not for your fairy kingdom. I wouldn't take your entire kingdom for this boy. And he says, okay. She leaves with all of her train. And Oberon complicates the plot. He tells Puck, go around the world and find, line 168 or so, the flower called love and idleness. Your gloss tells you it's a pansy. Okay? And he tells us what he's going to do with that flower. You drip it, you squeeze it, and drop the juice into a person's eye. The next thing that person sees when he or she wakes up, they will be madly in love with. And he says, once I get this juice, I'm going to put it into Tanya's eye so that when she wakes up, she's going to fall in love with, and he mentions a variety of animals. Okay? Two Athenian people come in. And we see Demetrius and Helena go back and forth. Demetrius actually threatens Helena with rape. Lines 2:14 and following. He says, you impeach your modesty too much to leave the city and commit yourself into the hand of one that loves you not, to trust the opportunity of night and the ill counsel of a desert place with the rich worth of your virginity. That is just a highfalutin way of saying, we're here and we're alone, and I could rape you. What's her counter? How does she respond? Oh, no, you couldn't. You're too virtuous. You're too good a guy, Demetrius. And he is. It's an empty threat on his part. Okay? So, Demetrius leaves. Helena leaves. Puck comes forward. He's got the juice. Oberon tells him what he wants him to do with it. Find the Athenian youth. Make it so that they both fall asleep. And when he wakes up, first thing he will see is that young maiden. He doesn't tell him what the Athenian youth looks like or what his name is. All he says is he's dressed like an Athenian youth. And he says, meanwhile, I'm going to go put this juice into Titania's eyes. Okay, we will pick up there. We'll pick up with scene 2 on Friday. I'm going to go ahead and put up a quiz today, probably, Background to Shakespeare, and like the first act or two, I don't even think it gets into the second act at much, if at all. Probably be due Saturday or Sunday. All right, have a good day.